childhood to what happened at 11. And I had a great childhood up until 11. I mean, I had a fabulous childhood. And then it was the dark years. And then I met a man who would be my therapist. His name was Jerry Limpick, and he brought charges against my uncle when I was 19, and that turned my family inside out. And I lost my family in the process. Mm-hmm. My real dad, my mom's been married 3 times. My stepdad is the guy that I always talk about as my father, but my real father, my mom divorced when I was 4. And his family told me that if I wanted to be a part of that family, I had to accept my uncle. After I won the court case, and I said, no, I don't want to accept my uncle. And I left the family. And so the story stops there. It talks about the traits that came out of that, the master at the art of detachment, and I go into 6 traits that came out of it, 3 that aren't good and 3 that are great, but how you take those traits and you make them work for yourself. And at the end, I said, hoping to find someone who cherishes my scars and hugs my character, something like that to the effect. It's called The Journey to Myself. It's on the internet. I mean, if anyone wants to read it, it was preserved. It won 7 writing contests. Wow. And I let it go after that. I did a couple of public speaking things, and then it just stayed on the internet. Fast forward to 2010, I'm doing the fashion shows here in San Diego, and the news media starts Googling my name. Oh. And that story starts popping up. And I wasn't doing social media at that time. I didn't start social media. I was very late to social media. I think I started in like 2013 or something. But there was nothing out there about me. And so the news media was getting a hold of this story, and they're like, we want you to come on and do an interview about this. And I was like, no, I'm not interested in talking about this. So I do the fashion show, and I have a documentary team following me for a possible reality TV show. And they followed me for a year doing the Emmys, the Oscars, and the Grammys, the Miss California pageant, the 2 fashion shows, and starting a clothing line. And at the very, very end, they came over to my house, sat at a dining room table with me, and they said, Stacey, we've changed our mind. And I said, what do you mean you've changed your mind? And he says, we decided we wanted to scrap the entire project. And I said, okay.
After a year? This is after a whole year?
After a year.
Oh, my God.
And they said, we have something we want you to do for us. And I said, what's that? And they said, we want to find out what happened to that girl. They found the piece, The Journey to Myself. And they said, we want you to tell everybody what happened to that girl after 21. And I thought about it, and it took me about 4 or 5 months to really decide how I was going to approach it. And I'm a big fan of Oprah's Master Class series that she has. Mm-hmm. And I said, if we're going to do it, I said, I want it shot like Oprah's Master Class. And, I'll write out the script. I'll write out, what stages I went through. Because, everybody goes from this girl that's 21, and then they see her doing the Emmys, the Oscars, and the Grammys. And when I try to tell everybody, there's a life lived in between that. That's 20-something years of a difference from the piece to my 40s. And I said, and there's mistakes in there. There's people I've hurt along the way. There's been successes. There's been, contentment. It's been a life lived. And so they said, we really want you to be as honest as you want to be and say anything you want to say, but we want to know what happened to that girl and how you got to where you are today. So we sat down and we did a documentary, and it's about an hour. It's shot Oprah's Master Class and style, where it's just me talking for an hour with photographs and video and that type of stuff added to it. And then one of the things that I did, I took it one step further, and I entered it into film festivals across the United States. and we showed in 3 and won an award in 1.
Wow.
And now it's
That gives
now
me
it's available on
goosebumps.
Amazon. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's very impressive. So it made you you had to relive that part of your life, not by choice, really. Well, I guess ultimately it was because you decided to do it, and it took you a while to decide, rightfully so. And now, have you been able to just fold the book closed on that and move on, or is that still a problem?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that there's any way to ever actually close a book. I think the traits that came out of that time period have stayed with me, and I've worked with them, and I accept them. So I'm not a perfect person by any means, and I don't pretend to be a perfect person. I embrace my faults. I hopefully learn from them and don't continue them. But if I make mistakes, I'm not hard on myself. But where I think the traits are going to affect me the most is making the decision not to get married, the decision not to have kids, because I didn't want to have children and bring them into the world and possibly do to them what ended up happening to me.
Mm.
So I don't know if you ever close a book on something like that. I think that is ingrained in you.
Mm-hmm.
I've went through therapy. I'm a big supporter of therapy. And I think that I made that decision that I knew that I didn't want to have kids by the time I was 13. Kids are not for me. Now, I like kids. I mentor kids. I have a niece and a nephew, and I spend a lot of time with kids. I just don't see myself. I never wanted kids. And maybe had that not happened to me and I had grown up in a different kind of a situation, I wouldn't have felt that way.
Right. Interesting,
So,
huh?
but that's a very profound, I think it's only 1% of women in the world that don't want to ever have kids. It's 1%.
And it would be interesting to see that 1%'s reason if it's, and I bet you 80% of that 1% have a similar reason as you do. I betcha.
Probably. I know that there's also statistics that say that when an older sibling raises a younger sibling, they generally don't want to have kids either because they've already done it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I have a friend that relates to perfectly. Yep.
And it's because, when my parents divorced, my mom was working. So it was my brother and I. I'm the older sibling. So, of course, I'm going to be handling a lot of stuff that has to do with him.
Right.
And that's a lot to put on somebody who's only 12 years old.
Right. How much younger is he than you?
2 years.
Oh, see, but that's enough. That 2 years, especially at 12, between 12 and 10, that's a big difference, especially for a boy, too.
Yeah, and like I said, you do what you have to do. You don't look at the time that you're doing it, you don't look at it. But, one of the things that I did in my 20s was I became a CASA. I was a court-appointed social advocate for foster care kids with a program called Voices for Children. And Voices for Children, because of my situation, I was able to really connect with a lot of the kids that were going through the system. And I did that for 15 years. And I ended up taking a lot of these kids and being a fighter for them and trying to help them, have a happy, healthy life, given their situation and they were in a worse situation than I was.
Right. You gave purpose to your pain.
Home. They had no family. I had a home, I had a family.
Right.
So it may not have been the most ideal situation that I had, but it just puts life in a completely different perspective for you.
Right.
And, I have nothing, I can't say enough about the kids that I dealt with. And to me, they're the true heroes because who can wake up at the age of 10 living in a, foster care home? And foster care homes are very different. You could be in a foster care home with 15 other people It doesn't necessarily mean you're in a home with a family. That's not
Right.
foster care. And not knowing from day to day whether or not that's going to be your home, not having a set schedule, having people coming in and out of your lives, not being able to be loved, or I just couldn't even imagine. I still to this day think about the kids that I worked with, and unfortunately, one of my CASAs, he passed away this year at the age of 26, and it was a freak accident. And I think about the life that he could have had, and now he doesn't have that chance to have it. And I don't know. It just puts things in a completely different perspective. And I think that's one of the things I always tell people. If your whole world is only you, then whenever you have a problem, your whole life falls apart. But if your world is multiple things, then when you have a problem, it's just a problem. And I just, I try not to get dwelled up. And that's why I never wanted to look backwards. There's no point in that. I can't change it. So what am I going to do going forward is all I'm interested in. So doing the documentary, while yes, it was great to have done it, and I don't, what do you call it? I'm not sad about it, but at the same time, I think to myself, my God, that was 40 years ago. I'm so much more than that situation, and I just don't want it to be what defines me. That makes sense?
Yes, perfect sense. Yeah, and it does. Yeah, I understand exactly what you mean. It doesn't define you, but look, it gave you the empathy to help those kids, but not letting it define you shows how strong you are. And I hate saying everything happens for a reason, because that's a horrible thing to happen to anybody. But those kids
not
needed
everything
you.
happens for a reason. Sometimes there just really are awful people in the
Right,
world.
exactly. But a lot of people wouldn't have been able to deal with it like you did.
Well,
that's
that
true.
depends on whether or not you think I dealt with it.
Well, the fact
everybody
that you
can look at everybody can look at something differently. My brother, prime example, is very sad that I never got married and had kids. He doesn't think I ever dealt with it.
Oh, right.
So it's all your own perspective on how you think you dealt with it. I personally think I dealt with it. I personally think that I've had a great life. I've had a great ride, and I mean, literally just a couple of weeks ago, my dad took me out to dinner, and we were talking about the fact that I never chose to get married and have kids. And my dad's thinking, did I do something to with that? I've had great relationships. I've had love. I've been in love. I've never had a bad relationship except one. And I think everybody has one bad relationship. I mean, I don't think it's possible that you can go through life without having one bad relationship. But I've been very lucky. I've had, I've chosen my path. It's not like the options weren't there. It's just I chose not to go down those roads. Mm-hmm. So it depends upon a person's perspective. My brother is a very roots person. He loves the house. He loves the kids, the PTA meetings, and the art classes, and all that kind of stuff. That's just not the life I wanted. Mm-hmm. So it's all a perspective on how you dealt with it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. And you don't know if you would have dealt with it differently had that not have happened, because it did happen.
True.
The fact that you did something to help other people that were going through it, and you could empathize with them having gone through it yourself, I think speaks volumes of the kind of person that you are. All other things aside, the fact that you gave purpose to your pain shows, I think, great strength in character, and just the ability to deal with things and move on. Did it leave a scar? Well, of course. How could it not? But I think you're doing just fine. And you're happy.
Yeah. You know what? Like I said, I mean, my brother only wants the best